The next group of invertebrates we're going to talk about are the spiny-skinned invertebrates, also known as the echinoderms. This is an example of echinoderm, this sea urchin, and you can see why they're called spiny-skinned invertebrates. There's significant spines on these creatures, and the echinoderms are primarily, again, water, ocean-dwelling organisms. They are classified according to particular features, and one of these features is the central disc, from which the rays come out. It's pretty hard to see in this sea urchin where the central disc is, but I'll show you examples where it's fairly obvious. It is also part of their unique anatomy to have what's known as a water vascular system. This is a complex system of water-filled tubes that are used for sensory perception and locomotion. Probably the classic echinoderm is the starfish, and it's shown in this diagram here. And the central disc, by the way, is here in the middle, and the rays or arms come out from the middle, and each of these arms is called a ray. Now, at the end of each of these arms are eye spots. So these would be here and here. And these are light-sensitive areas on the ends of each arm that are important for the navigation. And you can see here, by the way, this is where the central disc is. And it includes all this area in here, and then all the rays come out from that. Starfish has gills with which it extracts oxygen, and the gills are not visible on this diagram. And then they have something called the pedicellariae. The pedicellariae are tiny pincers that are used to keep the gills and the surface of the gills clean. And that, again, I said that the gills are not visible on this diagram, and so I can't point this out to you. So we have the rays here. Underneath the rays are the tube feet, which is how they attach to things and how they move. And then in the central disc is these blood vessels here, and then fluid, the water vascular system, goes out this radial canal from the ring canal, and each ray receives its own radial canal, and each radial canal is applied to the tube feet. And then centrally you have the stomach, and the intake for the stomach is here, and then the excretion occurs here. And out from the stomach in each arm are the digestive glands that are used to digest the food. So, as I said, the tube feet are used to grasp things, and they're important for grasping, and starfish eat mollusks, bivalves. And what they do, and I don't think I have a picture of this, but what they do is they take two of their rays, like say this one here, and this one here, and they attach them to the bivalve, and they begin to try to pull it open with these two arms. And when these two arms get tired, then they put this one on and this one on, and they just keep doing it until finally the bivalve tires out, the shell opens, and then the stomach goes into the bivalve and absorbs the living part and eats the living part and digests it for food. Now, as I said, the radial canals connect to the tube feet and allow for the attachment of the tube feet to whatever they want, to the surroundings. And then the ring canal connects to the radial canals, and the ring canal keeps the circulation to each of the arms. And then there's something called a sieve plate, which has the fancy name of madreporite. And here's the sieve plate right here, and this filters the material that comes through that. Now, another interesting thing about starfish and about echinoderms in general is they can regenerate. So, for example, if you cut one of these arms off, one of the rays off, they will regrow that ray. So here's a couple of examples. Here's one group of starfish. And again, these all have what's known as radial symmetry, by the way. If you remember, that means that you can cut in this plane and you have symmetry. Then you can cut in this plane and have symmetry between here and here, etc. So they have more than one plane in which you can cut and have symmetry. And these are the rays. This is the central area here. And then here's a closer look at the tube feet. You can see them right up under here. And you can see down here how they grasp and attach to the surrounding. Another group in the echinoderms is called a rotifer, which means wheel bearers. So here's two rotifers. One's a tube building rotifer, and this other one is a stationary rotifer. These were the first creatures that were, I don't know if you remember from the first few weeks of class, but we talked about Anton Leeuwenhoek being the first person to observe living organisms under a microscope, and he called them wee beasties. And what he was looking at the time were rotifers. Rotifers are microscopic creatures. Now, rotifers are interesting in that they undergo parthenogenesis, or they are parthenogenic. And what parthenogenesis is that they produce eggs that do not necessarily, they can be fertilized, but they do not necessarily require fertilization. And so they can actually reproduce, be solitary and reproduce. So we have mollusks, we have echinoderms. The next group are called coelenerates. And coelenerates are hollow intestine invertebrates. And coelenerates we know as jellyfish. And here's an example of a jellyfish. This is the Medusa form. We'll talk about that in a minute. And there are basically two forms, the Medusa form, which is shown here, and then a polyp form. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And everybody knows about the fact that jellyfish can sting you, and that they do that with cells known as cnidocytes. Cnidocytes are stinging cells that can sting and that's how they capture their food. A coelenterate is called a coelenterate because it has a sac-like body with a central digestive cavity. As I said, the polyp form, which is not shown here, is a form that does not move, and its mouth faces up from the ground. And the Medusa form, which is shown here, is the mobile form, and its mouth faces down. And the coelenerates undergo what's called an alternation of generations, which means that one generation is a polyp, the next generation is Medusa, the next generation is a polyp, next generation is a Medusa. And the smallest of these freshwater polyp forms is called a hydra. So here's an example of the Medusa form. The Medusa form, the mouth is down, has tentacles with the stinging cells in it. Then there's three layers. The echinoderm, which is the endoderm, which is the inner part on the inside of the digestive cavity. The outer part, which is called the ectoderm, which is out here. And the space in between, which is called the mesoglea. And here's the polyp form, mouth facing up, tentacles going out. The tentacles go out and they have the stinging cells, or cnidocytes, right here. Here's one stinging cell, here's another one. This is a close-up of the tentacles. And when you look closely at the tentacles, you can see the three layers, the ectoderm, which is outer, the mesoglea in the middle, and the endoderm, which is in the inner part. And the new hydras are produced by budding, and you can see that right here, but they can also be produced by an egg, which can be fertilized. And we know the coelenerates as most of them are jellyfish to us. So as I said, you have the alternation of generations. And this is a diagram to show you the alternation of generations. This generation will start over here, This generation is the mature medusa form, mouth down, tentacles down, produces a sperm cell which fertilizes an egg. It's kind of cut off here, but that ultimately goes down and forms a polyp. The polyp then comes up, mouth up, tentacles up, not mobile, and it'll produce and asexually produce a medusa form, and it goes back and forth that way. This is what's known as a sea anemone, and it's a polyp form, and this is a fish that hangs out inside of this, and right at this moment it's called a clownfish, and there's a special relationship between the clownfish and the sea anemone. The clownfish is impervious to the stings of the sea anemones, and so the clownfish is not sensitive to the sting, and so it hides out inside the sea anemone, and the tentacles protect it from predators, and at the same time the clownfish brings food in to the sea anemone, so they have this sort of symbiotic relationship. The coral reefs are formed by coral, which is a selenorate, and when it dies, it forms the coral reef. The last thing we'll talk about here are sponges, or porphyra. The porphyra are the simplest of these organisms. They lack a nervous system, and they have essentially two layers of cells. There's an opening where water comes out, and then an opening that takes in water. The opening where the water goes out is called the osculum. The opening where it comes in is called the ostia. And so the water is taken in, and food comes in with that water, is digested, and once the water is used, then it is expelled through the osculum. And within the inside of the body cavity are cells called collar cells that line the body cavity and extract the food from the body cavity. And on this diagram, you can see the collar cells on the inside. The water flows from the outside through the ostia, which are shown here, and then ultimately they go out through the osculum, which I'll show you in a different diagram. And then the support structure is the spicules, and this is what actually forms the sponge part of the sponge, which means when a sponge dies, and in the old days, the sponges we have now are made of plastic, but in the old days they used to farm these things, and they would use them like we use modern sponges. They reproduce by budding, which means small pieces break off and become new sponges.